It's April 1912, early morning on the deck of a rescue ship. She's 18 years old, 5 months pregnant, and had just been pulled from a North Atlantic lifeboat, terrified. She sat, shivering in a borrowed coat, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, and blankly watching the horizon where the Titanic was quickly sinking. The word widow had likely not fully registered for her yet. The crew gave her more blankets. Someone brought her warm tea. Around her, other survivors sat in the same stunned silence, none of them believing they were still alive. This is the true story of Madeleine Astor, and that moment on the deck of that rescue ship, cold, alone, alive, was not the happy end of her story. It wasn't even close. What came after that morning is an extraordinary and unbelievable life you've probably never heard before. We have to go back to Brooklyn, 1893, to know how it all started and to meet her before any of this tragedy had happened. Madeleine Force came into the world on June 19th, 1893 in Brooklyn, New York. And if you'd met her family back then, you'd have thought, wow, they are nice people, very nice people. They have a comfortable life, but nothing particularly remarkable. Her father, William, was in shipping. Her mother, Catherine, ran the place exactly how you'd expect back then. Neat, proper, and always keeping an eye out for a good match for Madeleine's future husband. They weren't the Astors, not even close. And if you're not familiar with who the Astors were back then, they were basically American royalty. Not the crown and ceremony kind, but the American kind, which is somehow way more glamorous and way more ruthless. The Force family was comfortably wealthy, the kind of family that had nice things and knew the right people and understood, without anyone needing to say it out loud, that Madeleine's job was to be beautiful, accomplished, and eventually someone's very suitable wife. So she learned piano, French, she learned watercolors and how to make conversation at dinner parties, how to enter a room in a way that made people look up. She was, by all accounts, genuinely lovely, way more than what society required, but in the way that made people remember her after she left the room. And by 18, she was doing exactly what was expected, attending the right events, being chaperoned everywhere, waiting essentially for her real life to begin. She had no idea what was about to arrive. And this would happen in the most scandalous possible way. It would change her destiny. Now, let's talk about Colonel John Jacob Astor IV. He was 47 years old, one of the wealthiest human beings on the planet at that time. And recently, and in a very public way, he was divorced. His first wife, Ava, had left him in 1909 in a society split that made headlines the way celebrities' divorces do today. Everyone had an opinion about the scandal. Everyone had already decided whose side they were on. Jack Astor was, on paper, everything a Gilded Age gentleman was supposed to be. He had inherited a Manhattan real estate empire so big it was almost impossible to picture. He'd served in the Spanish-American War. He had written a science fiction novel, actually a novel depicting solar power and space travel. He was brilliant and restless, and once the divorce was final, he really stopped caring what people thought about him. Now, you're gonna ask, was Jack Astor charming? was the kind of man who walked into a room and immediately owned it? No, not exactly. In the obvious way. He was tall and slender, quietly reserved, the kind of man who didn't need to fill a room because the room already knew who he was. What made him compelling wasn't charm, it was a contradiction. Here was one of the wealthiest men on earth, a man who owned half of Manhattan and could have spent his entire life doing absolutely nothing. And instead, he was into inventions, writing science fiction novels about solar power and space travel. He was restless, curious, and really interested in a future that had nothing to do with his inheritance or money. There's something magnetic about a man who has everything and is still searching for something. Madeleine, on the other side, had a remarkable beauty. She had dark eyes and an elegance that would go beyond being pretty. She had the kind of presence that nobody could avoid noticing. Let's go to the beautiful coastline in New England, to the cottages of America's wealthiest families spend their summers. And when I say cottages, I mean 30-room mansions with ocean views that would make you forget every problem you've ever had in life. Jack Astor's, of course, had a cottage like that, and it was there that summer, trying to recover from his divorce from Ava. The divorce had been finalized the previous year, and it was messy, public, and absolutely merciless in the way that only Gilded Age society gossip could be. He had retreated, regrouped, and was slowly, carefully re-entering the world. He was accepting invitations, hosting dinners, doing what men of his position did when they needed the world to see them standing upright again. And then, at some point that summer, at a garden party on a harbor dock across a dinner table, history doesn't really tell us exactly where or how it happened. He looked up and saw Madeleine Force. She was 17 years old. She was there with her family, probably doing exactly what she'd been trained to do at those kind of events, looking lovely, saying the right things, being the perfectly accomplished daughter of a perfectly respectable Brooklyn family. She had dark hair and the kind of self-possession that some young women have that makes them seem older than they are. And Jack, one of the most powerful men in America, a man who had genuinely seen everything the world had to offer, stopped, stunned. We don't have his words for that moment, but we have what he did next. He invited the entire Force family to his Bar Harbor estate. He took Madeleine on a car, driving along the coast. In 1910, a private automobile was almost the equivalent of a private jet, an experience designed to say, I want to show you the world and I have the means to do it. He took her out on his yacht. He made sure, carefully and consistently, that she was near him all the time. The press noticed by spring, pretty girl may marry rich Mr. Astor, the headlines read. And this was both charming and slightly wrong for what was clearly, on his side at least, something far more serious than a passing interest. He was 47 years old, he had a fortune, a mansion, a science fiction novel, and a military title. He had, by every measure, everything. And he spent a year making sure that Madeleine Force knew she was the one thing he wanted. The age gap between them was 29 years. Now she was 18. He was 47, almost 48. And I want you to sit a bit and not judge it, but to understand what it meant in 1911, in that world with those rules, to have this situation. The newspapers were merciless. His own son from his first marriage was older than his new fiancée. But here's what the scandal coverage always missed, and what I think it matters most for the story. He chose her, specifically, deliberately, at the cost of every remaining shred of his social reputation. And she chose him back. Not the money, not the title, not the mansion. Him, the odd, brilliant, restless man who wrote science fiction and didn't particularly care what anyone thought. They married on September 9th, 1911, quietly by Astor standards. The society pages sharpened their knives anyway. And so they left. Egypt, Europe, an extended honeymoon that was equal parts adventure and escape. Away from the whispers, away from New York, away from everyone who had decided they already knew how the story ended. It was during that honeymoon that Madeleine discovered she was pregnant. And then it was time, they decided, to go home. For their return to New York, they booked tickets on a brand new ocean liner that was making headlines across the world. The most modern ship ever built. The luxurious and famous, absolutely and completely unsinkable. You already know the name. The Titanic was the Gilded Age made into a vessel. All access and confidence and the firm belief that human engineering had finally conquered nature. First class was essentially a floating palace. Wood paneling, plush carpets, private promenade decks, everything you could imagine. The Astors had a suite with more square footage than most New York apartments. Madeleine was 5 months pregnant and finally heading home, ready to sleep in her own bed. The voyage was planned to be the gentle, comfortable final chapter of their wonderful honeymoon. And for 4 days it was perfect. And then came the night of April 14th, 1912. At 11:40 in the evening, the Titanic struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic. The impact, remarkably, was almost subtle, a shudder, a strange sound, the kind of thing that made passengers look up from their card games and then go back to them. Many people went back to sleep. Jack Astor was not one of them. He understood quickly that something was very wrong. The way the crew was moving, the lifeboats being uncovered at midnight. This is not a good sign on any ocean liner. He got Madeleine up, got her dressed, got her warm, and walked her to the boat deck with the quiet, focused urgency of a man who had already done the calculation and didn't like the answer. The rule was women and children first. The lifeboats were being loaded, and Madeleine, 18 years old, pregnant, terrified, didn't want to go. She didn't want to leave him. Jack helped her into the lifeboat himself. He asked the officer in charge if he could accompany his wife, given her condition. The officer said no. Rules were rules, even for the richest man on the ship. I have to stop here and comment on how remarkable that was. He didn't try to bribe anyone with his money. He just followed the rules. He did the only thing he could. He asked which lifeboat she was in, number 4, so he could find her on the other side. He tugged her in. He told her everything would be fine. And he stepped back. Survivors described him as composed, calm, and controlled, helping women and children into lifeboats, not panicking. His last recorded words to Madeleine were, "I will see you in the morning, darling." And here I have to pause again to think about the pain of this man having to say goodbye to his pregnant wife. He knew it would be their final goodbye. Can you imagine a scene like that? Madeleine sat in that lifeboat as it was lowered down the side of the ship, watching her husband grow smaller and smaller above her. He was standing on the deck in his evening clothes, composed and still, watching her go. The kind of goodbye that no one should ever have to say, least of all, an 18-year-old girl. At 2:20 in the morning, the Titanic broke apart and slipped beneath the water. John Jacob Astor died in the North Atlantic. His body was recovered days later, identified by the initials on his jacket. Madeleine survived. When the Carpathia docked in New York on the evening of April 18th, thousands of people were waiting. Reporters, photographers, families desperate for news. The survivors who came down that gangway were shaking. People who had lived through something the rest of the world was only beginning to understand. Madeleine was whisked away quickly. The Astor name still commanded that much. But there was no escaping what came next. The press wanted everything. The public felt entitled to her grief, her memories, her last moments with her husband. She was 18, pregnant, and expected to perform her widowhood for an audience of millions. She retreated into seclusion, and there, quietly, surrounded by the Astor family who had never fully approved of her, she waited for her child to arrive. On August 14th, 1912, 4 months after the Titanic sank, she gave birth to a son. John Jacob Astor VI, born into one of the America's greatest fortune and into the shadow of a tragedy that would follow him his entire life. The press called him the Titanic baby. Madeleine called him hers. Now let's talk about the inheritance. Jack Astor had left Madeleine well off. She had the Fifth Avenue mansion and $100,000 a year, which would be about $3 million today. Plenty for her to live a beautiful, safe, and comfortable life forever. But there was one condition. If she remarried, she would lose it. All of it. The income, the mansion, the financial security, gone. Everything reverting back to the Astor state. She could have everything, as long as she stayed alone, as long as she remained for the rest of her life the proper grieving widow of John Jacob Astor. She was 20 years old by now. And I want you to think about it with me. 20 years old with so much life ahead of her, and the whole world telling her that she should be a widow forever. She just have to enjoy the money and security of her inheritance and give up on loving and being loved ever again. Her grief would be the price of her security. Well, for 4 years, she lived inside that gilded cage, quietly, properly, as expected. But then, William Dick came into her life. William was a childhood friend, a banker, steady, kind, around her own age, someone who had known her before the Titanic, before the Astor name, before any of it. Someone who saw Madeleine, not the widow. She fell in love with him, quietly, in a way that doesn't make headlines. And she knew exactly what it would cost her. On June 22, 1916, Madeleine Force Astor married William Carl Dick. She was 23 years old, and with that single choice, she walked away from one of the greatest fortunes in America. The mansion, gone. The income, reduced to almost nothing. The financial security she'd been promised, traded deliberately for the chance of a real life. Society was scandalized. Of course it was. The narrative was instant and cruel. She never loved Colonel Astor. She was a mercenary. She was disloyal. She moved on too fast. Never mind that she grieved for 4 years. Never mind that she'd given up millions to remarry, which is the opposite of mercenary. Never mind that at her age, she had already survived more than most people face in a lifetime. The story was set. History had made up his mind. But here's what I keep coming back to every time I tell the story. She knew the cost and she chose love anyway. That is not a scandal. That is one of the bravest things a person can do. William's income meant they lived well. Not, of course, Astor's well, but they were comfortable with a real home and a real life. She had 2 more sons with him, William and John Henry. They grew up to become something his Gilded Age grandfather could never have predicted. One of them became a naturalist, a conservationist, a man who spent his life illustrating birds and documenting the natural world. I find that quite amazing. The son born from Madeleine's brave choice, the child whose existence cost her a fortune, grew up not chasing money or status, or even legacy. He grew up watching birds. The marriage to William eventually struggled. All that pressure from being an Astor and years of public scrutiny really took a toll, and they divorced in 1925. Madeleine was then 32 with 3 boys, no money, and still a whole life to live. In 1933, she married again. Her new husband, Enzo Fiermonte, was an Italian boxer and actor. He was younger, handsome, passionate, basically the total opposite of her old life. And I'm thinking out loud here. Really, after 20 years of being told how to grieve and live, it's easy to see why she was attracted to him. He really paid for that choice this time, blowing through that little money she had left. Her financial freedom slowly vanished. The whole thing finally fell apart in 1938. Madeleine claimed extreme cruelty in the divorce papers. She spent her final years quietly in Palm Beach, resting away from the spotlight that had followed her since she was 18. Madeleine's life, after all her choices, was human and imperfect. She tried again and again to live fully, but made choices that didn't always work out, like all of us. And she really carried the Titanic with her every single day until she died in 1940 at 46 years old. History mostly remembers her as the young Titanic widow, the girl on the lifeboat, the woman who gave up the Astor fortune. But I think she deserves a different memory. She was so young when the worst night of her life happened on that freezing black ocean. She had no say in it, no warning, no preparation, and yet she got up. She raised her son. She chose love over security not once but twice. She was aware of what it would cost her because she had already learned in the most devastating way possible. She learned that safety is not the same thing as living a happy life. The Titanic took 2 hours and 40 minutes to sink. Madeleine Astor spent 28 years refusing to go down with it. That's the love story. That's the story that nobody tells. And I think it's the one worth remembering. If you enjoyed the story, please let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.